elected as a lawmaker, apart from corruption, what other measures would you take to promote good governance?
Let's talk the truth. We've seen people behind bars contest elections and get the most number of votes. We've seen people who've been accused and even in some cases convicted in the court of law hold high government positions, but they come with the people's mandate. So the people in their respective electorates, knowing that they have done illegal things and they've been convicted, but they send them to parliament. So the public has to take some sort of accountability themselves, just as the politicians are held accountable to elect and send some representatives who they can be proud of.
People always talk about a change. They need a change and they want a system change. But do you think most people know what change they're seeking?
We as legislators should focus on telling the truth to the public. I think that is the change that the Aragale wanted. They wanted this entire stale political culture wiped off. They wanted a set of legislators who would tell them the truth, the reality as it is. I think that is the main change that I want to see in terms of being a legislator.
Welcome everyone. You're watching another episode of Conversations. We are getting very close to the presidential elections, just a few days more, and you get to decide who goes to parliament. So during election period, many people make election promises, but how easy or how practical is it to implement all of this? So what should you look for when you vote for a candidate, especially a new candidate? I think what's important is to consider how capable is the candidate. What is his background like? What are his qualifications? And can he really convert his plans into action? So today I will be joined by Keshal Jayasinghe on my show. And let me give you a little background information about Keshal. He received his education at Royal College and then his higher education in USA. He has experience in businesses and also has been active in the field of politics for quite some time. He has worked closely with the late Mangala Samaravira, and after the Aragalaya, he joined as the digital media director after former President Ranil Wickremesinghe assumed office. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kishani.
So this is probably my last interview before we head to the general elections. So first of all, let me ask you, why have you chosen the New Democratic Front as your party and former President Ranil Wickremesinghe as your leader?
Well, thank you for having me on this show. Ranil Wickremesinghe is my leader because I represent the United National Party. Like you mentioned in your introduction, I was formerly with the late Minister Mangala Samaravira. I worked with him as his coordinating secretary until his untimely demise. So I've been a member of the UMP because that is the party that accommodates most of my beliefs. We believe in liberal values. We believe in a capitalist system. So I think United National Party is the best fit for me. And in doing so, I also believe Mr. Wickremesinghe is the leader this country should have.
All right. So let's get very real. When you think of contesting the general elections this time, who you say is the real and actual competition for the New Democratic Front? Would it be the SJB or the NPP?
Well, we don't see other parties as competition. For us, it's a matter of standing for our principles. We have presented a program which was implemented by former President Wickremesinghe during a time when the country was in dire straits in 2022. As you can recall, there were queues everywhere. People didn't have access to adequate medicine,
Sure.
food shortages, and there was all sorts of chaos. And one man stepped up, took the challenge, and got the country out of the crisis. And now even the World Bank has said that Sri Lanka has been stabilized. But unfortunately, people, the Sri Lankan psyche is such that we are always dependent. They always expect everything from the cradle to the grave from the government. But during the crisis, I don't think we could have done that. It was about ensuring economic stability first, and then at the same time, we also took care of the most vulnerable segments of the society. As you can see through the Aswasuma program, formerly which was the Samurdhi program, we increased the allowances threefold. So it was a difficult time. But coming back to your question, I think it's about not about competing with other parties. It's about telling the truth to the people, accepting the reality instead of selling pipe dreams. Just telling as it is, this is what we can do, these are the resources we have, these are the assets we have. The representatives of the people should always tell the truth, and I think it's about pushing our program to the people and getting their acceptance to it.
So, if I asked you which party has the best team, what would you say?
Of course, it's the NDF. I say that, Kishani, because we have proven it during the last 2.5 years. Sajith Premadasa, as the opposition leader, didn't step up. In a time of crisis, in a functioning democracy, the usual practice is if the government cannot handle affairs and the people want to change, it automatically goes into the opposition. But what did the opposition leader do? He didn't step up to the plate. He created all sorts of excuses and shied away from getting the country out of the crisis. But Ranil Wickremesinghe, having only one seat, stepped up to the challenge, got the country out of the crisis to a large extent. We are still not out of it, mind you, but in doing so, he also had a solid team. So they have the experience. If the current government, by any stretch of the imagination, we don't want the country to fall because we all suffer. But if there is something or a situation where you need a stronger opposition with experience, I think the NDF has already proven it during the last 2.5 years.
We did talk about reforms and steps which were taken during President Ranil Wickremesinghe's tenure, which were tough, but like you said, necessary. So, are these measures, do you think these measures will be carried forward by the NPP, or do they have a new framework?
You asked whether the current government is following Mr. Wickremesinghe's program. If the current government is following that, we have no issues. We are not going to criticize because it's the same
like you
program
said,
we backed.
Yes.
So we are going to back the government. It's interesting because so far the president has maintained some silence over the IMF program. Are they going to continue with the SOE reforms? Are they going to continue with the debt sustainability analysis? So the president, I think, needs to make a statement to the nation in his capacity as finance minister, whether they are going to proceed with the same program that was implemented by President Wickremesinghe.
All right. Let's talk about the NPP attempting to reduce perks and benefits of members of parliament. How do you see this?
Well, it's an interesting question. If you take Singapore, for example, I think what Lee Kuan Yew did was he ensured that legislators, even those in the state sector in general, were well remunerated, because to attract top talent, you need to compensate them well, because otherwise you can't compete with the private sector or increase efficiency and productivity, because you can't expect a top professional to work for a meager salary. Having said that, we are not Singapore yet. On a personal note, if I may add, during my 2.5 years at the president's office, I did not take any vehicle or salary or any of the allowances that I had been entitled to, because that was a personal sacrifice due to my personal economic standing that I could afford to take. But at the same time, I think there should be fair compensation to MPs and state sector workers.
All right. So, since you are contesting from the Colombo district, how do you plan to implement and bring about change? And what do you wish to address?
Well, Colombo is a diverse and very vibrant city. This was the city that I was born. I was bred here. I went to school here, and we associate people from all walks of life. I think one of the major problems that I see is urban poverty. Urban poverty is not an issue isolated to Sri Lanka. It's an issue that a lot of global metropolises face these days. So if we dig into the root causes, there's chronic poverty and structural poverty. And out of these two, I think it's easier to resolve and focus on structural poverty. The necessary infrastructure and the institutions are in place. It's just that we need to speed up these processes so that the government and the necessary departments and agencies can have an integrated approach and give solutions accordingly. And the other problem that I also see is congestion, especially in public transportation, because if you see, I'm sure you can attest to this, I don't think a lady or a woman in general can have a safe bus ride or a safe train ride without being harassed.
Sure.
That's a big issue. So we need to ensure that there are proper mechanisms in place. We definitely need to improve our public transportation. We need to have some high quality bus services, and then also improve facilities in our trains and as well. Another issue is unplanned urbanization, which also affects, leads to structural poverty and congestion, because you see structures coming up. Unfortunately, our urban councils and municipal councils have a role to play because, they are rampant in corruption. We have to speak the reality. If you're building a house, if you pay a little extra, you can get a few feet more in your landmark. These are things that have been happening. I have seen a couple of houses down my road that have taken such benefits. So we need to focus more on proper urban planning so that we can have a good metropolis.
You just spoke about corruption. It's everywhere and it's a persistent issue. As a lawmaker, if you are elected to parliament, and as a lawmaker, what would you do differently to tackle this issue of corruption?
So during Mr. Wickremesinghe's tenure as president, he brought in a lot of legislation. He empowered CIABOC, the commission, to investigate allegations of bribery and corruption. So they have been given a vast amount of powers. I hope the incumbent president now has the opportunity to appoint officers to that. I think the chairman has to be appointed by the Constitutional Council, so that will take a while because the parliament has to convene. Like I said, the necessary framework and the institutions are there in place. It's just a case of enforcement. So, and there is also a civic duty, because who goes to pay these bribes? It's the public. It's a two-way street, right? The officials can't just come to your house and demand for bribes. It's usually the public that goes. So it has to be a two-way street. I think we as citizens have to take a deep interest in our country. Okay, let's see if we know that these officials are corrupt, but we are not going to endorse them. We are not going to entertain this. We are going to work according to the rule of law. But that's from a citizen's perspective. From an official's perspective, I think it's up to the government, especially these institutions like Searbach, who have been now empowered to go and prosecute and capture all these corrupt officials to minimize corruption, because I don't think any country has wiped out corruption. What you can do is through proper institutional frameworks and laws, you can minimize corruption.
Sure. I think it's important, even though there is no country with zero corruption, like you said, it's important to minimize it and bring about a system which is more accountable and
Absolutely.
transparent. So, if elected as a lawmaker, apart from corruption, what other measures would you take to promote good governance?
Well, I've always stood for transparency and accountability. What I've seen in Sri Lankan politics, Kishani, is that people aren't held accountable for their actions.
Sure.
I mean, as an aspiring politician, I would urge the public to always hold their representatives accountable. It's the public's duty. I mean, we've seen, let's talk the truth. We've seen people behind bars contest elections and get the most number of votes at a general election. I don't want to drop names,
Sure.
but we've seen that. We've seen people who've been accused and even in some cases convicted in the court of law, hold high government positions, but they come with a people's mandate. So the people in their respective electorates, knowing that they have done illegal things and they've been convicted, but they've sent them to parliament. So the public has to take some sort of accountability themselves, just as the politicians are held accountable to elect and send some representatives who they can be proud of.
So it's evident that pre-Aragale and post-Aragale, between these two periods, there was a shift in Sri Lanka's political culture as people were demanding more accountability and were actually taking steps to hold their leaders accountable to a certain extent as well. So there's also a demand, and people actually want to see newer, younger, and capable leaders in parliament representing them. So, given that now there are many new faces, how would you say that you would do things differently?
Well, first of all, I would like to pledge to the public who's watching this program right now that I will always speak the truth. I will not tell you lies and sell you impossible pipe dreams. Because the fact of the matter is, when it comes to Sri Lankan politics, we do not take a citizen-centric approach. We always give promises that we can't honor. So I can say that, I mean, I can't vouch for any other, but in my case, I can definitely say I would not tell anything that I can't stand by. Whatever I say, I will honor.
All right. So, moving on to my next question. So, there were many laws introduced during former President Ranil Wickremesinghe's tenure between 2022 to 2024. What would you and your party do to strengthen the rights of women, children, and marginalized communities? I think so many laws have been introduced already which strengthens rights of people and the rule of law.
Well, there were a few bills that were introduced. The Women's Empowerment Bill was passed, and through that, I think one of the main new institutions that came about was the National Commission for Women. So this commission has been now empowered and given a mandate to address all sorts of issues affecting women. So I think that was a good step in ensuring that the women of Sri Lanka has equal representation, maybe in the workplace or even in public. So that is one. And then there was the gender equality bill, but the Supreme Court said that the certain clauses were inconsistent. So I think we have to go back to the drawing board. But the gender equality bill, I think, is something that we as a country should really focus on, because it completely stops people being discriminated based on their gender or their sexual identification. Especially, I mean, I think if we talk about the LGBTQ community, I think they undergo through a lot of harassment. There aren't enough provisions in place, even though the Constitution says you can't discriminate against any person based on their beliefs and such. That is not the case. I mean, they go through a lot of police harassment. So I think President Wickremesinghe did the initial step in bringing this gender equality bill forward, but I think now it's time for us to have a public discourse among ourselves. And I hope the incumbent president also resubmits this again to Parliament after proper discourse, of course, between legislators and the public, and move forward. Then when it comes to children, I think, like I've been saying, there has been enough institutional frameworks and structures in place. The National Child Protection Authority has already been empowered to assist and take matters pertaining to children and ensure that their well-being. Is just that we need to create seamless integration between all these structures, between the central government, these institutions, and ensure that there is a proper flow.
I do hope that, like you said, the current president would continue the reforms
Yeah.
that have been made in terms of protecting marginalized communities, women and children. So moving on to my next question, I think everyone speaks a lot about the economy now, and this comes at a time where people have faced an economic crisis and really seen how it can affect their lives. So when we speak about the economy, there's a lot already been spoken about how to increase state revenue, how to bring in more dollars. What would you suggest that we do differently to bring in, to strengthen the economy, apart from the traditional means that have already been discussed?
Well, I think one area is tourism. I still don't believe that we market this place we call home. This, I mean, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, right? I think outside of Africa, for example, we have the best safari destination. But I mean, I've been lucky enough to visit Kenya during my childhood. I mean, we have the same kind of wildlife, flora and fauna, both from the misty mountains to the sandy beaches. We have a vibrant culture. We have so much to offer to the world. But I think the previous government under Mr. Wickremesinghe, you saw how Sri Lanka was marketed, and we've been constantly ranked as one of the best places to visit. So that is, I think, one area that we should put more focus on. Another area is cutting down on wasteful spending. The Wickremesinghe administration had been doing that, but according to the IMF discussions and what they have said in the diagnostic reports, for example, out of the 500 or so SOEs, 450 SOEs are run on treasury funds. That's your taxpayer. That's my taxpayer funds.
Sure.
We need to look at bringing in private investments. It's not about, like, there is this undue fear in Sri Lanka that privatization is bad. It's not bad as far as we don't succumb to unnecessary fears. We need private investment. We need private investors to come and take this burden of Sri Lankan taxpayers. For example, Sri Lankan Airlines. A kid, let's say in the deep south, somewhere in Hambantota, he goes and buys a toffee, he pays taxes. No? Buys a piece of chocolate, he pays taxes. But will he ever step on that plane that he's paying taxes for? Why is he burdened with that? That's money the government can. We are talking billions and billions of rupees that could go to education, to health. So I think SOE reforms is also another part that we could focus on, and we could get adequate money to invest in other areas.
Apart from the most obvious issues that Sri Lanka faces, what do you think are the most pressing issues that any government coming into power should address immediately?
Right now, I think adhering to the IMF program is of paramount importance, because the entire future of this country is now tied with the IMF program. So President Dissanayake needs to make a clear statement whether he's going to alter the IMF program, like he said before the elections, or whether he's going to stick with this program. Because if this breaks down, then we are looking at an even graver crisis than what we faced in 2022.
So sticking to the IMF program is crucial, you would say.
Yes.
Given
It's
that,
of paramount importance.
given that the situation is still very fragile.
Yes.
All right. So moving on to my final question, Keshal. Now, there is, like we spoke about, a political shift, and people always talk about a change. They need a change and they want a system change. But do you think most people know what change they're seeking?
That is a very pertinent question. I think the public in general has to ask that question themselves, right? What is the change we are seeking? I think in the Sri Lankan political discourse, it has been based on identitarian politics.
Sure.
Right? We like I mentioned before, we've divided ourselves according to race, religion, and our personal political beliefs. But I think both the legislators and the public should move towards civic nationalism. We as legislators should focus on telling the truth to the public. I think that is the change that the Aragale wanted. They wanted this entire stale political culture wiped off. They wanted a set of legislators who would tell them the truth, the reality as it is. I think that is the main change that I want to see in terms of being a legislator.
As a legislator, when you make a promise, it has to be a promise that you can actually keep and implement.
Absolutely.
Because like I said before, there are so many promises made, but is it even practical to implement all of it?
And I would urge the voter to hold your public representative accountable. You can't turn a blind eye. This is a two-way street. If only the public holds their respective representatives accountable, would they also be inclined to change and ensure that their citizens' welfare is number one priority, not their personal welfare?
So before we end the conversation, just a few days left for the general elections. What sort of representatives should the public be sending to Parliament, and any message you wish to give to our audience?
Yes, the public should be very selective in who they send into Parliament. I hope this time the Aragale has given a clear message to send some youthful exuberance into the legislation. So I hope, regardless of which party you intend to vote for, that you would send some capable youth, including women, because I think women representation is important. The 52% of the population
And they are not represented
at
equally.
all. But I would also like to remind that it was Mr. Wickramasinghe and his party that has always pushed forward legislation encouraging more women's participation in politics. So, coming back, I would urge, implore the voters to actually look into their characters, look into their belief systems, look what they stand for, and most importantly, cast your vote for someone you would be proud of later on in life.
All right. We have come to the end of this conversation. Thank you very much, Keshal, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Gishani. Thank you
And
for
if
having me.
elected, I hope you will be able to bring about real change. As I believe that, yes, we need experience, but we also need parliamentarians who can bring about change and keep up with the times, because I mean,
Yes, they
with
need to be
technology,
updated.
they need to be
Absolutely.
updated, and times are changing and evolving. So we need new young faces who can actually keep up with the times and bring about change and adapt with this fast moving world.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for watching. That was Keshal Jayasinghe. He's contesting from the Colombo district. New Democratic Front, which is the symbol of the gas cylinder. I will be back with a new episode. Until then, stay safe and take care. And one final message before you head out to vote. First of all, do vote. And secondly, before you vote, think about the implications your choice will have on future generations and for yourself as well. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with a new episode. Stay safe and take care.